Well, hello and welcome to today's Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. I'm pleased to be joined today, as I am most Wednesdays, by our lead solution engineer, Dion McCormick, no relation. Today we will be doing a short demonstration at the very beginning and then answering your questions. And this week, actually, quite a few people have written in with questions ahead of time, which we'd like to see. Couple things to know before we get started. Like I said, this is a questions-driven session, so please go ahead and type your questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. The second thing is that these sessions are recorded, and you can find copies of these recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Hello, Dion. Are you there? I see that you are.
Yes, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
Okay.
And I will let you know when I can see your screen. And I can see your screen.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been a banner week. I think we've got more pre-questions, although a few came in late, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. But thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving the heads up. It allows us to kind of get prepared and be able to have a much more instructive session in terms of that. So thank you so much for joining us. This is Dion McCormick. I'm the lead solutions engineer for Alpha Software. Along with me is Dave McCormick here. I've got a quick presentation. I've gotten a number of different questions recently regarding lists and grids and wanted to kind of give you a quick overview about that. And then we'll move on to some questions we got through the week, and then obviously open it up for any other questions. And that means this is your chance to participate. So do me a favor, go to your GoToWebinar control panel, take those burning questions you've always wanted to ask and put them into the question section. Dave will be monitoring our session today, and we'll get them organized and put them together so we can try and get to as many of them as possible today. But thank you so much. I know you're all very busy. You're all in the mode of delivering solutions for your end clients or for your business, and we really appreciate you joining us and hope that you find it valuable. So with that, what I'd like to do is spend a few moments talking a little bit about grids versus lists. And this is a interesting topic, both from a historical standpoint, but also in terms of kind of what is the architecture, what should I go and move forward from there. So what we're going to do and talk about today real quick is Alpha, and again, maybe for new people, let me cover this. There's two primary ways to display tabular data and interact tabular data on your user interfaces. One is using our grid component, and I will show you a real quick demonstration how to put that together. And then the other is called a list component, which is a newer component that is used on a form, a UX, and has really brought a lot of new features, capabilities that didn't exist before. And they're both valid components. This is an important thing to realize, is that both grids and lists are very useful, and it's not a matter of which one's better. It's more of, for a particular situation, application, scenario, which one is better, because you'll find that you'll use a mix of them in your solutions because they both have their strengths and their weaknesses, and depending on what you're trying to do, one may be more appropriate. Originally, just a little history on it, is that the grid, chicken and egg, the grid came first. This was a desktop component, really built to support desktop solutions. It was migrated onto the web and enhanced significantly to allow you to present grid data on the web, including editing that data. And then over time, what was realized is that as we started to look into the mobile environment, it turned out grids were extremely powerful, very capable, but not the best fit for what we were trying to do in the mobile world. So basically the development team took a look and said, listen, we really need a new type of component, in this case called the list, which is going to be optimized for web and mobile solutions from the get-go, and is really going to be designed around doing that. So that didn't negate the grid's capabilities, nor its strength and its ability to solve problems, but what we really did was enhance and bring online a different tool for your toolkit that was more appropriate when you were putting together solutions for web and mobile, and in particular mobile. That's really the driver behind the development of the list component. And as it grew and as it started to mature, there were some very unique and special features that were required in the mobile environment that made sense to integrate with the list component. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So really, what I want to talk about is what are the differences, just to give you a feel for the differences, and then a real kind of rough guideline on which which one should you use in terms of which solution. And again, it's really going to be your judgment call. And I think as you get familiar with the different technologies of grid or list, the more familiar you are with those technologies, the more you can make that call to say, hey, I'm doing this, it makes sense to use a grid in this scenario, or I'm going to use a list in this scenario. So let me go through a quick rough rundown of the history and kind of where things are for grids and lists. So I'm going to focus and first look at the grids. Before I do so, I want to take a step back, and then I'll get into this in a moment. But first, Dave, everything coming through okay? Just doing a process check here?
Yes, it sure is.
Excellent, excellent. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump over into my Alpha 5 development environment. And for folks that are new, this is the Alpha 5 development environment. You'll notice that I'm at the Web Projects Control Panel, which is your primary sort of starting point. You'll see on the left I have a series of different kind of categories, and in here are my sample items here. And you'll notice I have a large number of them in here just because this is my demonstration project, so it continues to grow and grow, and you'll be able to handle it from there. But let's talk about real quick, I'm going to create a new grid component, do it very quickly so you can see what it is, what it looks like. So I'm going to click New. That's the New button up here in the left-hand corner. I'm going to select Web Component, click Next. I'm going to select Grid because I want to create a grid component, and click Next. Now, it's presenting me with a whole bunch of different system templates, and actually you can create your own, which is very nice. But I'm going to go ahead and just create a blank one by not selecting a template. Okay, so this is my builder for my grid. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on Query, and here I'm going to select what data is going to be populated. And this is an important thing. The grid is a database connected animal, meaning that it is connected into a back-end data source. So in this case, one of our alpha DAO connection strings. And what's really neat about this is that as we expand and improve the connection strings, traditionally they were database oriented, meaning SQL databases, but now they're starting to move towards also web APIs and things like that. So you use the same concepts when working with these things. But I'm going to select this connection right here, which points me to my database. I connect to it. Now I'm going to select what out of that database I'm going to use. In this case, I'm going to click Customers because I want to pull the data out of the Customers table. Okay. I could set a filter, do order by, that's all available. Now I'm going to go to the fields. So this is now going to show me all of my different fields that are available. And I'm going to go ahead and just select a set of fields here, click them on here, and now I've got a grid. And this grid basically auto-generates this whole representation for me. I don't have to do any HTML, JavaScript, or anything. It handles the interaction with it. You'll notice that it dynamically went ahead and called the database, brought the data back, and formatted it. I have navigators that are already built in and available, so I can navigate to these different pieces here, and you'll have all that information here. Very straightforward, very easy. Now, very powerful, because what I can do is go up to this component type selector here, and I can say, you know what? This grid contains a detail view part, and it is updatable. So you'll notice now I had my original grid, which was kind of a read-only, visual-only, but now I've also said, you know what? I want to be able to edit this data, and I'm going to put in this detail view here. So now you'll notice on the left-hand side, it's added a section called Detail View, where I can click here, and it gives me a field section. So I'm going to click company name, contact title, a few of those. You'll notice that it is also adding them as text boxes here and saying they're editing. And so now I can go ahead and go into working preview, and it's going to be a little different now. Oh, I have to do something here. It's saying there. What I have to do is in my detail view, I need to make sure that my primary key is available, and I can hide that if I want to. So now I'm going to go into working preview. You'll notice now it's changed a little bit. I still have my representation up here, but it's done a couple things. One, it's allowed me to have, it's changed these to link fields for the customer ID. If I click one of those, notice what happens down below. It automatically loads up this detail view, and in here I can go ahead and edit that, and I can save it, and you'll notice that it saved the value to the database and updated it not only in my detail view but in my grid view. So what's really cool about this is that within a matter of a few moments while discussing it, I created a fully editable grid, and I can launch this and run this in a web browser, and it would work. It will work fine. You'll be able to deploy it through the internet to people. Obviously you want to use our security system to include that, but let me go ahead and open that up. It's opening up here in my live preview. And this same grid that I showed before is now operating in the web browser and interacting with my backend database, and everything I showed you works fine through the grid, through there. So that is the grid component. And then I'm going to go back and talk a little bit more about the strengths and weaknesses of that, but that's a grid component. Now let me go ahead and show you a list component. So I'm going to click New. In this case, I'm clicking a web component. And what I'm going to do is actually a list is a subtype of UX. So it's an actual piece that sits on a UX. So I'm going to select UX, click Next. I'm offered a whole series of different, oops, sorry, my printer. Let me go ahead and ignore that. Apologize. Ran out of paper. You'll notice that I have a whole bunch of different templates that I could use here, but I'm going to start with a blank one. And now that I have my UX, I have my different controls that are available, and what's very important is this control right here, this list control. So what I did is I have what I want to put on my UX. Here's my list control. I'm going to click List, and I'll go List Customers. Okay. Now in this case, what I'm going to go ahead and do is, since I want to move quickly on this, I'm going to click the Quick Setup Genie. So I'm going to select my connection string like I did with the grid. So you'll see there's a very similar philosophy that is being used here. I'm selecting where I'm getting my data from. Here's my data. It is customers. Okay. And then here's the fields I want to bring back. I'm going to go ahead and bring them all back. Okay. I could set up a filter order and things like that. Now I can go down and say, yes, I want a detail view, much like the detail view before, and I'm going to click OK. So now what's going to happen in a few moments is it's going to build my list right here, which is equivalent to kind of that read-only grid, and here's my detail area. So now if I go into working preview, this will take just a moment as it compiles it. So now I have my grid up here. I haven't really prettied it up yet, but you'll notice as I go through and click on these, it's achieving the same thing. You have your list to select and your details here. So I can scroll down here. I can go to region, go 3, 2, 1. You'll notice that down here gives me my editing buttons, and I've edited that, and go. Now, you'll see a couple differences, and we'll go through in more detail here. But let me show you something very interesting. Let me click Mobile, and I'm going to go into List of Customers, and I'm going to do one thing that's kind of cool here, is I'm going to go into the list format here, and instead of using kind of a grid format, bear with me, I'm going to go to Freeform, and then I can lay out my freeform here. So you'll notice already I have a lot of flexibility in terms of how I use this to lay out my solution. But I'm going to select a standard template. I'm going a little quick, but I want to go through this. And now that I've done that, I'm going to say, I'm going to go into my working preview. And I'm kind of pretending it's a mobile. So now you'll notice that I'm in mobile here. You'll notice that the list looks a little differently here, but it all acts the same as when I tap on these items or click on them. the details down below are being updated as we speak. Now, I haven't laid this out very nicely. I would set it up there, but you'll notice something right out of the gate. You'll notice this looks like a mobile interface, meaning that this looks a lot more like a scrollable list. In fact, let me do this real quick. I'm going to go in here, and just to really show you where some of the benefits are, I'm going to put in a panel navigator, and then around here I'm going to put in a panel card. I'm going to click here and say fill that panel card, and I'm going to put my detail in a second panel card. Okay. And this list needs to be actually inside that panel card. Now look and see what it looks like now. Starting to look like a real mobile solution. I have my ability to drag this along. I can click an item here. Actually, on the second page is my detail here. You'll notice that I've set up a kind of there. But you'll see that it's much more attuned to creating a interface that runs on a mobile interface. And that was really the genesis for this, was that the grid control works great, but really didn't work very well in the mobile environment. It was a little bit more structured and didn't lend itself to customize it to run into mobile environments. So what happened was the development team took a step back, said we need a new component that actually does a lot of what the grid is, but is really optimized for web and mobile, and they put this together here. So I'm going to go back into my history and talk a little bit more about the history. I hope that gives you a quick introduction to the different components. As you can see, they have very similar purposes, i.e., grab a list of data, show it to the user, allow them to view, search, sort, etc. that data, and then be able to interact with that data through a detail view. So really they kind of perform somewhat the same duty there, but there's certain flexibilities that come with it. So let's look at the grid real quick. First, it's a very mature component. It's been around for years. It started out on the desktop. There's an enormous amount of support for grids. There's an enormous amount of example codes. There's an enormous amount of functional feature customization and very powerful things you can do with a grid. So it's very mature. It comes from its desktop roots, so that you'll notice kind of the look and feel and how it operates is really desktop-centric versus mobile-centric. It does have extensive features, and I'll talk about one in particular in a moment that is just amazing and crazy cool. It has a built-in detail form, so you have the built-in editing capability, and again, that has an enormous amount of flexibility in terms of how you interact with that, so you have that. And as you can see, putting a grid together is very, very fast. It's click, 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 put it in, make some adjustments, you're off to the races. So I find for quick and dirty, kind of just putting stuff together, grids are really handy because they take over and handle an enormous amount of the plumbing for you that you would normally have to do. Now a list, I would call it medium maturity. I'd say it's on its second iteration in terms of being a product. It's continuing to mature dramatically, especially when we start talking about the upcoming mobile optimized forms. It's the centerpiece for that. It is mobile first and foremost. It was really built for web and mobile deployments and its behaviors and way it operates, etc. It relies heavily on HTML and CSS for formatting. You'll notice that I went in and let me go ahead and show you that real quick. You'll notice that this look and feel right here, what I did is I went into my list, I went into the detail view, list layout, excuse me, and you'll notice that I've dictated how I want to lay that out using HTML. So you'll notice that I've got a div and some style. I'm showing my company name and my contact name, and then also I'm showing an image that's that sort of selector, sort of dig down deep kind of selector there. So this is all driven off of HTML, CSS, which gives you an enormous amount of flexibility. In fact, one of the coolest capabilities, which I won't go into detail, is you can create dynamic templates where literally you can change the representation on the screen of every element based upon its data if you so choose. It's really, really flexible. It takes a little bit more work to put together, but once you got a handle on that, you have essentially infinite flexibility in terms of how you want to represent your data. Whereas a grid, you have similar capabilities, but it's a little more restrictive in terms of how it allows you to style the grid itself, the detail views, and things like that. So it is HTML formatting. It does have a detail view. And here is the #1 big difference in terms of what a list gives you that a grid does not, and that's disconnected operation. So right away, if you have to do disconnected, you really have one way to go. Because what happened is...
Hey, Dion, it seems like we just lost audio there. Are you still there? Hello, Dion, are you still there?
Let's try this. I'm plugging my headset back in.
Okay.
Did it come back?
Yep, I hear you. Well, I hear you. It sounds like a different mic.
There we go. How's that?
Yep, that sounds good.
I got so excited I must have bumped my headset. And,
okay.
My USB port is getting a little long in the tooth.
No.
So if you need, so the history again is that the list component was generated for mobile, was starting to get used very heavily and used for editing data in the field. And the realization was, hey, you know what? If I'm on a mobile platform, I may not always be connected. I mean, there's certain situations where I'm not connected. So the development team used the list component as the basis for providing disconnected operation. So the list component allows you to store data locally on the mobile device and then edit it, interact with it, and then synchronize it back to the back office. So that capability really never existed in the grid. The grid was always considered to be a real-time connected entity, and therefore if you need any kind of disconnected stuff, you really need to move towards list. That's a very important piece there. Now, what's very interesting where Alpha is moving is that the list component kind of combined two roles. One was it was a display and interaction sort of control, so you could create a display of data and then interact with it, but also they embedded inside of it the synchronization and the offline capability. Alpha's working heavily right now to kind of separate those roles out so that you won't necessarily need a list in its current incarnation to then have a sort of a local data store that is synchronized with the back end. So you'll see actually one of the new features is data side caching. That doesn't require a list now, which is kind of neat. So the team is heavily moving towards separating those roles out. But let me go ahead and take the next step. Excuse me, that's a little bit of the history here. What I'd like to do is just, if we look at kind of when you're starting to go through your decision-making process, you know, these are some of the sort of things you should think about in terms of where that. First is, what is the size of the component that actually ends up either on the web browser or on the mobile? The grid is going to be heavier. It's a bigger component. There's a lot of built-in functionality and capability that needs to be downloaded, so it tends to be a little larger. The list control is much lighter. It's a lot smaller, compact, really optimized for mobile. So therefore, you know, you'll have a little bit of speed differences between the two. Secondly is that the responsiveness capability, sort of responsive design, meaning if you tilt your phone or you use a tablet versus a phone, well, the list is optimized for responsive structure. So as I move it, like for instance, if I go back into my demonstration real quick, and I go to my working preview here, and you'll notice I have my list display like this. If I go to avert horizontal, you'll notice that it automatically laid out and consumed my whole screen size and kind of moved this over to the right and aligned it a little differently. That's responsive design. Well, the list component has that built in from the get-go since it was just destined for mobile, whereas the grid, less responsive. I mean, it does a little bit, but it's much less responsive in terms of being able to handle kind of multiple delivery vehicle environments. Complexity, the grid has an enormous amount of complexity. I would say this is ability to handle complexity, meaning there's a lot of features and capabilities that are built into the grid that are just because it's been around for so long, it's matured so well. The list control is maturing very rapidly. Obviously, it has one that's available that's not available in the grid, which is disconnected. But more importantly is that they're adding more and more capabilities to the list over time to increase the kind of sort of complex things you need to do out in the field. Speed, the grid is very, very high. It is super optimized for operation with large data sets. That was what its original there is. The list control is very fast and getting faster, but because of the way it operates, it's a little different animal. So you won't see a huge amount of difference, but what's nice on the list is it's a smaller component, so it will load faster, but you may see differences in speed there. A big one, which I'll show you in a moment, is built-in mapping capability. The grid has that built in, which is really nice for GIS type applications, whereas the list, you really need to kind of build separate elements around your UX to produce that. And the biggie, which is disconnected operation, that with a grid you really don't have that opportunity. With the list control, it is built in and it is native, and it's built from the get-go to help you out with disconnected. So if that's key criteria, that's going to make an answer right there. Now, I mentioned briefly built-in mapping. One of the coolest things Alpha did added to the grid, and I believe this was in about the V10, V11 timeframe, is that Alpha has built-in mapping capability, which is really cool. So you can actually, inside of a grid, you could essentially add a full Google map to a grid, and the grid will automatically display that information in a spatial or map geographic methodology, or GIS methodology. You have an enormous amount of hooks to change the icons, the structures. You'll notice that in here the different bubbles are different here. You can do something very, very cool, which is called geofencing or geosearching, is that you can actually add a map to a grid in the search area and draw like an area on your map, and it will then filter that grid based upon that. So if you're doing any kind of mapping stuff, you really want to check out the grid and its capabilities, because, man, it's really fun, it's very powerful, it's very easy to implement and deploy, and very flexible in terms of modifying, because they've essentially put in all the hooks that you need to interact with Google Maps to present that data in there. And I've used that on several projects. It's a very cool wow factor. And as you start doing more and more mobile solutions, geolocations is very important. You have an inspector in the field. You want to know where that inspector is. Well, the mobile device could be updating a back-end database with the current geolocation information. In fact, you want to say, oh, this person did an inspection. Well, you can, on the mobile device, record when the data is saved, but also where it's saved, and then be able to use the back-end grid to do a quick map of where these inspections occurred, where the data was saved, where it was collected, etc. So real fun. I highly encourage you. There's a great series of videos that are available that walk you through this capability, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's one of the cool features there. So if I were going to be using from a deployment standpoint, if I'm doing desktop web, I'd lean towards grid, just because I can put it together very quickly. I have a lot of screen space, and I'm able to change things very rapidly. My speed to deployment is very quick. If it's mobile, I'm going to be leaning towards a list, just because it's more optimized that. And definitely if it's list disconnected, I really don't have any other option than a list, so that kind of helps you kind of go through those pieces there. And what you're going to find out is that when you start developing solutions for your clients, or as you continue to mature your solutions for your clients, you're going to find out that you're going to actually probably be doing a bit of a back office dashboard that's on a web browser, desktop web, or maybe a client interface that's going to be accessed through a desktop web. You'll also have people out in the field with mobile. You'll be mixing and matching these, so you'll actually be using both types of components over time. And that was one of the key things I really wanted to kind of impress, is that one's not bad and one's good. They're both excellent. It's a matter of how you want to apply them and the appropriateness of what you're applying them to. So feel free to have fun with that, experiment with it. Definitely check out the grid. Mapping capability is really, I mean, it is so slick. I show people it and they just get blown away, because, you know, geolocation is becoming so much more important. They want to be able to quickly take a data set and render it and understand, well, geographically, what does that mean? You know, where am I having the most alerts? Like, I'm talking to a specific company that does fire inspections. Well, where's the density of the number of infractions? Which areas, which counties, which areas of towns, etc. And that kind of intelligence is extremely valuable and worth a huge amount of money, because it allows them to optimize their business. And with Alpha's built-in grid mapping capability, it's child's play to put that stuff together and be able to present that data in a very substantive way to your clients. So that is grids versus list. It was meant as an introduction. I get a lot of questions around that. That's why I kind of brought it up today. That kind of concludes my presentation here. If there's any questions, did I go too fast on something? Please add it to the questions there. I have 2 questions that were asked this week, and they kind of first come, first serve. So I'd like to talk about that in a moment, but I'm going to take a 1-minute break here and ask Dave just, touch base with him, make sure everything's working okay. And if not, we'll go into the next questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. So we had a loyal reader, or one of our loyal listeners, send us some questions earlier this week. And actually we were able to resolve one just right away, but there was a very interesting question regarding grids. And again, this is kind of an idea of where you could accomplish this both in lists and grids, but the person is using a grid. So in this case, what I have is a grid here. And the question was, well, I could go into this grid and I could go in here and I could hide columns and show columns, and so I know what fields are available here. And that's all fine and good, but that's kind of static in nature, meaning when I run this bad boy, you're going to see that it is a fixed set of columns based on what I said. But they had a requirement where they wanted to be able to have a little bit more control, or actually have their users. So they wanted their users to be able to say, you know what, here are the different data fields that I could show in this grid. Now, in this case, I only want to show maybe 2 or 3 of the columns, not all of them. Now, normally you say, well, great, I've got to create different grids for each segment of that. And the question was, well, is there a way to dynamically change the visibility of columns and do that in sort of a programmatic way instead of a manual methodology? And the answer is yes. And actually, I found this by searching on the message board. And I got to bring that, bring everybody's attention. One of the key help capabilities is our vibrant, very involved group of people on our message board. Always take the moment to check there, because there's an enormous amount of history, especially things like grids, where people have run into the same problems you've probably run into, and they've been asked and also hopefully answered. And in fact, there may be videos showing how you do that. So I went through and found this, and this is how it works. I have a grid here, and in my grid I have specific server-side events. And I have a whole series of different events that occur on this grid. And these are your hooks to be able to put in code to modify how the grid works. And in this particular set, the on-grid execute, and if you're ever curious what these events do, just click on this little line down here, click for info. You'll notice this event fires every time the grid is executed. This includes every AJAX callbacks, which is very, very handy for many reasons. So in this case, what I can do is when this on-grid execute function runs, I can put in a little piece of code that I found on the message board to allow me to show and hide columns based upon what I want to do. So for instance, I realized when I was looking at it, you have to put in these 2 little lines of code here. And this basically tells the grid, because the grids are really rendering HTML and stuff when it puts it out there, and it uses a lot of pre-compilation to make things go real fast and make the grids render much faster, etc. So one of the things I needed to do was first put in these 2 pieces of code that basically said, hey, the grid must recalculate the layout, and it's using calculating the layout and controls. These things tell it that you now have the ability to programmatically do stuff. And here is the most important little piece of code here. Basically it says for field number 2, field info number 2, column, hide is equal to true. So this could be true or false. So let's go ahead and just say false. So let's go ahead and look at our grid right now. You have a field here. Field number 2 is company name. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you my working preview first. And you'll notice that company name is being shown, okay? So I have all the fields in that grid, but now I'm going to go back, going to go into my server-side event, and I'm going to say for field number 2, I want that to be hidden. So I'm going to set the hide to be true. And I go into my working preview, and you'll notice something. Look what happened. That column disappeared. It's not available in here. So you're able to dynamically show and hide. So in here, what I could do is do a lookup to a table, get a list of the columns that I would like to show or not show, and then spit this information out here and do that in this area. And this is not just limited to show and hide. You can also set the header. So you can actually control the column's header. So I believe, let's see what happens here. This may blow up, so bear with me. So header is equal to, hey, webinar. Okay, and I'm going to set that to be false because I want to see column number 2. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's do a working preview. Let's see what happens here. Oh, no, I must not have it right. But the bottom line is that through this code setup right here, that'll teach me, you can modify dynamically the column information before it's presented to the user. And this is very easy to do within here. And there's a lot of examples on the message board for doing exactly this. And there's some documentation on how to manipulate this. So you can go in here and you say, you know what, I want field 2, and I want field 3, and I want field 4 to be hidden. By the way, there's other ways to reference this, so you can figure that out there. But now I can go to my working preview, and you'll notice I have a much tighter, smaller, because it's hidden those other columns here. So I can go in this area and do that. So again, sort of the answer of the in-person is absolutely, you can dynamically change columns on grids very, very simply. And what you would do is on the grid execute, you would use this capability here. Make sure you include these two commands, because otherwise these won't fire properly. But then in here you would say, you know, do my database lookup for the person's preferred columns, then loop through and set the column status, hide/show equals done, you know, and then spit them out, and then boom, you're good to go. So that's how it would attack solving that issue of having dynamic columns in a grid component. Any questions? I mean, if you don't mind just letting us know if that answered the question for you. I have another question that came in I'd like to cover in a few moments. Let's see. Dave, should I go ahead and go to the next question, or?
Yeah, sure, and then we could take the ones that people asked during this session.
All right, cool. And again, we've got some other questions that came in. We've queued those up. We'll be reviewing them. So if we haven't answered your question so far, we'll try to get to it as soon as possible. The other question is that a user, and I'll go ahead and create this real quick, is that had created, they were building a mobile component, and they were using a mobile, so this is the mobile component here. Where is it? Which one is it? What do you mean? Ah, there it is. Security Framework Login Component mobile app. So I'm doing this. So they had built a mobile app, and this is the standard mobile component. So if I click Working Preview and show you what it looks like real quick, it's got a username and password and a login. And when you click this login button right here, what this does is it triggers the login behavior of this. So for any of your mobile components, this is how you would add a login that would use our security framework. And again, we're not going to go through the security framework today, but we did a presentation just a couple months ago on the overview of the security framework, how to set it up, so you'll have a chance to work on that there. But in here are some really powerful capabilities that if I look at the client-side events, on the server side, we have a on login event. So this is going to fire, and this will allow you to go in and say, look up other information about the person logging in, set some session variables, do other things associated with that. And this allows you to control that sort of login process. The system is going to take care of confirming that they actually have the rights to log in, but but you have the control to then say, okay, I can do other things that I need to do there. So the question came from the user saying, hey, this is working all fine and dandy, but they noticed that Alpha has a pre-built login component, and I'm going through and picking that right now, okay? So, oh, I don't have my security active, so I won't be able to show you that real quick. But I have, oh, actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and let's go here. Bear with me. Let me open up a different one here. Okay, I've got a pre-made login component here. This is for another project that already is there. And this is what you would see like on a desktop web. Basically, it presents this right here to the user, and it has the ability to click login, login. It also has a couple things that are very, very powerful about it. It has a built-in change your password functionality that allows you to do that. And I think it also has a remind me kind of functionality. So there's some other nice little features that are built into it. Now, the question came saying, hey, great, that's all nice. I like those kind of built-in features, but then how do I do that on login kind of processing? And the way we handle that is the following, is that in our web security, we set the redirect page after login. And this is where after the person has been logged in, the system will automatically point them and send them to a different page. In this case, I said home.a5w. Now, with Alpha, what I do is I can create, actually, I had one in another project, so let me grab it out here and bring it into this one. I'm going to need it in here. Bear with me here. Okay. Oh, you know it's not in that one. Should have been prepared. My apologies. Ah, there we go. Okay, we'll just go here. So I'm adding this. Okay. So we'll have a A5W page. So right now my security system is saying go to this home page, which shows a tabbed UI for this particular app. But what I'd really like it to do is go to another page called login processing. And let me go ahead and open that up. Now on this page, there's no really visual elements. All I have on this page is a Alpha script. So what happens is when the system hits this page, the application server is just going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to run this code. And in this case, what it does is it grabs the person who just logged in, their user information, it does some lookups, and it sets some other things, and then it does a response.redirect to a different page. So basically, in here, I can put the equivalent of that on login, where after the mobile component, or after they log in, it takes them to basically a page that's just script that then allows them to then, you can then find out who they are, load up some session variables, and maybe even decide, well, they need to go to this page, or they need to go here or here, other kind of things along those lines. So what you want to do is, for the situation where you're not going to use the built-in mobile login, what you can do is create a login component. In your web security, on the login options, the login redirect option, the redirect page after login, basically tell it to go to, in this case, login processing.a5w, and now what will happen is when the person logs in, it takes them right to that login processing. In login processing, it's going to set up some information about them, do all the other things you would like to do, and then inside that code or that script, I then say, now take them to the page that has the tabbed UI or wherever you want it to go from there. So that's how you would essentially accomplish the same thing. And the benefit for the individual in this case is that when you use the login component, it has some built-in functionality to allow the person to automatically change their password or make modifications, etc. Within the system. So pretty handy kind of stuff that's already built into the login component. So it handles a lot of heavy lifting stuff for you, so you don't have to. But again, you lose that ability to have kind of a built-in set of code on this component to run after login. Just use the login processing page, which is just a set of XBasic script that's going to run. And you'll notice there's no other HTML items or information around it. It's just these items here. So hopefully that gives you enough to be dangerous. Go ahead and play with that. That's kind of a normal process. You'll see other developers in the Alpha community that use that login processing page to kind of set everything up after a person is logged in. and we'll go from there. So that's the 2 great questions we got from the field. Really appreciate it. Hopefully those answered your questions. And with that, I'll turn it back to Dave. You can kind of look through and let me know what's next.
Great. Here's a quick question. It has to do with the SQLite DB connector, which we're using in PhoneGap. It's coming out in version 4.
Yes.
This person has had it. I'm just wondering, will it be available for desktop and web components as well?
Well, interesting enough, at this point in time, I don't think there's any plans of doing so.
Yeah.
It's really using the built-in PhoneGap APIs that are kind of built in to use SQLite for mobile devices. So at this point in time, no. You know, the issue you have with web is that, well, can the web install a light database on the person's server? There's a huge amount of security things around it. Whereas with PhoneGap, you're essentially wrapping all that stuff and installing it as a package on the client's mobile device.
Right.
So at this point, I don't know of any plans. I understand why you would love to do it because, A, by having a little baby database sitting on the web browser, it would allow you to, A, save a huge amount of local data, thus operating faster, have faster refreshes, hit the server much less. 2, it would enable disconnected operations. You can do disconnected operations with a web browser because of the list control. But yeah, that would be really, really cool. But I'm not sure of any plan or if there's really the technical infrastructure out there in terms of web browsers to enable to have that kind of built-in database capability. But we'll feed that back to the development group, letting them know. You never know what's out there. I mean, it would be kind of interesting to have like an industry standard database that's available. But you know how that would be abused.
That would be cool.
Wow, all of a sudden, where'd my, you know, I'm working on a laptop. It's like at 128 gigs. Wow, I only have 2 gigs left. Where, you know, who downloaded that 5 gig database onto my local machine?
That is, so I guess though apparently there was a database specified for HTML5, although it never either didn't make it to the final HTML5 specification or it just hasn't been implemented in browsers. But I could see something like that coming on down the road.
Yeah, my guess is it's like one of those things that everybody, it's a great idea, but to actually implement it in a good way is very dangerous and problematic. And I think they're just trying to get all browsers to render these pages the same, you know, first. But it'd be cool because then you would really enable super high-speed apps because you cache all this data and be able to have basically using what's called JSON templating, where the user interface basically just refreshes it from the local cache and then every once in a while gets updates. So your servers would really take a positive turn for, you know, because you'd be hitting them far less. You know, I think guys like Google and stuff are working that direction just because they do know that there's only so big these server farms can get, and there's so much processing and memory out in the field, why not try and leverage it? So hopefully there'll be more that comes along that way.
Excellent. A question here, is there a tool or a script available to copy an entire web project?
If I could ask a follow-up question, to clone it or to copy it to a different machine, or what? If you don't mind asking, we'll come back to that before the end of it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, I kind of have a couple ways to approach that, but I want to really make sure I understand the individual's question.
Excellent. This one might be too long to cover, but I'm going to raise it anyway, and if not, we can talk about it later. And this person is saying that they're often having difficulties when they try to run update and insert SQL commands from their XBasic functions. He says, I'd love to update from the alpha program, and I do get them to work eventually, but it's usually a struggle. Is there some place that gives examples of different programming styles, in other words, using arguments and things like that for using update statements?
That's a really good question. And why don't we take that as a...
let's take a look. That's a great one. So let's make sure we get
that's a great one. And we don't want to delay you. You know, I think first and foremost, definitely use arguments. I'm a huge proponent of arguments, mainly because arguments prevent SQL injection attacks. That's the #1 reason you want to use arguments. And for people who are not familiar with it, is that let's say you have like a form where you're asking, and I'll go ahead and, let's say I created a form. And let me go ahead and do this real quick, just to give people a little background on it. And I'm going to create a form here. And then what I can do is I'm going to go to my controls here, and I'm going to say first name, last name, address, phone. Okay, so I've just created some fields on my UX here. I'm going pretty quick, but now I can go in here, and then I'm going to create a button on here. Now, normally what I would do is I would be using my data binding to attach this directly to a database table. But there's certain situations where you may not want to do that. You may want to manipulate data and then insert it yourself. So when you click the submit button to save it, instead of using the built-in data binding, you can actually write your own little code that will grab the information from the user interface, build up a SQL statement like a insert or an update statement, and then fire it off and get the results. And that's kind of where this person is coming from, is they've written these statements that basically use XBasic to make the calls. Now here's the tricky part, and why I talk about arguments, and we'll go in this more detail, is that let's say I'm in here and I'm saying, yeah, Austin. Okay, so I've gone in here and done this. So I'm a normal user, I click it, it inserts that into the database. But check this out. What if I go in here and I say select star from web security users? Pretty tricky. I just put a little SQL statement in there. Now what will happen is if you're not prepared, the system's going to say, oh, I'm just going to insert this statement into my overall SQL statement and submit it. And SQL may interpret that as a separate command and actually throw an error and send the information. I've seen it where it'll actually literally send the information back to the web interface as an error message with a list of web security users. It's that bad. And this is called SQL injection, because what I did is I put a little piece of SQL. Inadvertently, that got passed along to the request to the server. The server's stupid. It says, oh, you want a list of people from web security users? Here you go. And it sends it back. And even if it doesn't actually send back data, often you get an error message back, and if you just display that error message, it tells the address of the server, what the port the server is using, and a whole bunch of other data. Now what you do is if you use arguments, instead of building up your SQL statement by just kind of concatenating or adding these texts together, what you actually do is insert each of these items into an argument, and then the system runs a query using those arguments, and by doing so it eliminates this problem because the arguments make sure that you don't insert other SQL and things like that, so it's more secure. So definitely use arguments in terms of your SQL, building your SQL there. But as far as creating reliable SQL calls, we can do a little session on that to say how you would do a call, and it's kind of more of a geeky programming session. But often people are interacting with the database and need to write a little piece of XBasic call, like maybe in a server-side JavaScript, like an AJAX callback. They want to do a lookup or things like that. Then I'll be glad to show you on that. Too little time today, but that's a great question, and we'll put it in, and we'll put that together and have that available.
Excellent. Someone actually pointed out also that there are a bunch of examples in the XBasic SQL videos, and to link to those I have placed in the chat window. So you might want to
and remember, built into the help video finder, so we can go XBasic. If you spell it right, here's all the different XBasic things that show you how to use XBasic in here. You know, SQL connection, man. There are some in here too, but yeah, definitely go to the one Dave sent you first. But I always like to remind people there's a bunch of great videos built in right here under the video finder.
Let me see what else we've got here. Oh, there was the person who we asked whether they were cloning or moving their web project.
Oh, yes.
Written back, and they said that they're interested in cloning it.
Okay, great. There's actually let me go here. There's let's go here, and there's a great answer for that. The answer is yes. Okay, Steve Wood of IADN a long time ago put together a batch file that actually literally you give it the name, you walk through it, you give it the name of a folder where your existing project is, a name of a new folder, and it will actually rename all the project files. It's very slick, because part of the issue is if you just copy this, like for instance, let me go ahead and just go into, let's say, this one right here. You'll notice that everything is named CPPS because that was just the code name for the project. So the original project workspace was called CPPS, okay? So that was the name of it, and you'll notice that in here it named all the subdirectories CPPS and used that throughout of it. So our friend, and actually, you know what, Steve put together this little batch file. It's very cool, very powerful. Go back to my alpha there, and you put it in there, you run it, there's some instructions on it, and it basically takes your project, clones all the files and renames them, and you essentially have an identical set of it. Now, you have to go in and make all the tweaks for the connection strings, etc., but it's very, very handy. And where I found that was on copy clone workspace on the, let's see if my search is running here. Oh, it's not logged on here. It's actually that I found it on the Alpha web web bar, so, or on the board. He had posted it a long time ago, and it's still there. I do have a copy. I guess I could, and it's under free rights. He doesn't charge for it. It's something he did to support. So again, it's Steve Wood at IADN or alphatogo.com. I wonder, can I share this file with you? I'm not sure if I can do that or not. I'm looking, Dave, I'm looking on my little control panel. Not sure if I can share that.
Yeah, if it's, what type of file is it again?
It's a bat file, so that's also problematic.
Yeah, that's not going to let us put that.
Yeah, there's a lot of, because of nasty things. But go to the web, the Alpha software forum, the message boards, and search for that, and you'll find there's, Steve put it, and it's a copy project, a little bat file that's available there. And what we'll try and do is, I wish I had that. I could, let me see if I can log in real quick. Hold on. Let's see. Oh. Since we're there, we really want to keep it. Oh, good, it logged me in. Okay, so we can go copy project. See if I can find it in the system there. I'm going to have to find that. God, where is that? Yeah, I don't want to waste any more time today. But what I'll do is I'll find it, I'll send it over to you, Dave, and maybe you can, I wish I could forward it out as a URL right now.
I'll bang it out to the list for the next invite.
Okay,
if anyone needs it before then, just send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com.
Yeah, if you have a burning desire, let me know. We'll find it.
Yep.
It's on here somewhere. Ah, here we go. Utility to make a copy of a web project.
Oh, and someone else actually found it too. Let me,
good.
I can paste that link in.
Okay, I just put it in the message box to you, so you should be able to copy and paste it.
Yep, and that's in.
By the way, in order to download this, you will need to be a member of the board. So it may ask you to log in and create your credentials, but if you haven't done that already, you should have. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Enormous. Yeah. But also real good. I want to credit Steve Wood, who put this together. I mean, think of how many man hours this saved for everybody. To find out more about Steve, it's Alpha to Go, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, is it?
It may be Tio.
Wood.
No, maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, there's Steve Wood music. Yeah, maybe it's Alpha to Go.
It is. It's ALPHATOGO.
Okay. Yeah, he's got. Go check out alphatogo.com. I like to give him credit on it. He's got some really cool stuff. He's got pre-made frameworks and other tools, cart programs and stuff. He's a very vibrant person who's really helped build the community, and so I want to give him his props. And check it out at alphatogo.com. And he's got some cool stuff, his framework and other tools. Plus, he's the one who developed and put together this utility and offered it up for free to everybody. So pretty cool stuff.
Excellent. Fairly quick question. How do you open up and read an encrypted DBF table using a UX component?
Oh, man. DBF. I might
DBF
not.
and then UX component often don't hang
Yeah.
out in the same sentence because it's sort of an older technology.
Yeah,
You
I'd
mean
have to look into
besides
that.
converting it to SQL and just using it out of SQL?
Yeah.
Cheating.
Yeah, I'm going from 1989 to
We'll take a look.
2016.
All right, we'll put that
no,
in
I
place.
mean, all kidding aside, I'm actually working on a project, long-term project, and they have massive DBF tables with encryption and stuff. I have not done that specifically, so I'll have to go in and find out how to do that. But we'll get an information on that.
Terrific. Excellent. Well, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank everyone who attended. I want to thank you, Dan. I want to thank the people who asked questions. Dan will be out for 2 weeks, but he will be back after that, and we will have...
You're going to miss everybody.
We're going to miss everyone. We're putting together some nice webinars to do during that 2-week period, so we'll be working on those, and we'll let you know about them, and we will send you registration links.
Keep those questions coming.
And keep
we
the
take
questions
them very
coming.
serious.
Great. So thank you again, and I hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.